Yeah, thank you for inviting me here to give my opinion about the funding conditions for this. Now, let me just make, before answering your question, a short step back and basically considering the environment. I mean, a lot of the things I'm saying, perhaps they have already been addressed in different sessions or this thing, but I think it is important that we have to reiterate them when we are talking about financing condition. I mean, one thing is that there is a broad agreement that you need next generation access, and fiber to the home is, or fiber infrastructure is bound to play a key role in this. I mean, there's broad agreement on that. Now, there is a fact that you have at least a short-term financing problem. Now, you can tackle that with different ways. Now, first of all, you have some financing conditions which are basically due to the fact that the fiber is too expensive. It's too expensive, so it will never be able to be financed by a private operator. You have another problem that fiber is at the moment too expensive. It might then be better in some years down. Now, depending now on the problem that you're facing, you have to, you can address that with different financial tools. Now, that is precisely one of the things that is going on, especially also at Commission levels, to identify the appropriate financing tools. As a matter of fact, in the Connecting Europe facility, there has been a special mentioning of financial instruments. I mean, just to remember, it's close to 10 billion is now the proposal for allocating for broadband, and out of that, some 6.5 billion is bound to be for financial instruments. Now, clearly, you need some form of subsidy. Now, given the whole problem that you have in Europe, or the whole investment requirements, it's just the sheer investment requirements, which are large sums. Means one can imagine that to satisfy the digital agenda, you would have to spend some 200 billion over the next 10 years or so. It's clear that the amount set aside by the Commission would not be enough. So you need leveraging. Now, you need in some way get private money into the thing, and private should do the big part. Now, you can do that again with different things. You can leverage public money, but you can also use regulation as a leverage for funding the infrastructure. Now, when you start thinking about regulation, you think about the industry structure of how such a network would look like. Now, from the most of the descriptions, it comes pretty close to a sort of a public utility. Now, we know how more or less we would need to finance public utilities. Sometimes it's not even, it's relatively easy to finance public utility, especially if you don't have any kind of technological risk, if there are natural monopolies. So it is relatively easy to raise private funding for this kind of utilities. You just need to ensure the investors a comfortable rate of return and fairly ring-fenced sort of asset-based, which basically ensures that the investor can sleep very comfortably. And this would indeed be able to raise substantial amounts of money. Now, clearly, we are in a sector here, talking about a sector where this is not necessarily the case, because it's a sector where you have a relatively rapid technological change and quite a substantial technology-induced uncertainties and risks. So that makes the whole picture clearly more difficult. You have also sort of several bypass technologies which investors are concerned of, because they see that, I mean, if the technology is not picking up its role in the envisaged way, it could well be that the financing, or at least their funds, are at risk. and this is a worry to investors. Now, in Europe, regulation has been, at least up to now, regulation has been induced very much by the notion of opening access and increasing competition in the market. Basically, with the idea that ultimately and justly that the consumer should be the main beneficiary of the whole activity, and which is, I think, which gave the whole exercise great legitimacy. Now, on one hand, and we have seen it before, prices in Europe are incredibly low compared to, if we compare it with the US. So we have to be, on one hand, very thankful that this has happened. But on the other hand, we have also to think about what are then the investment incentives for an investor to invest for infrastructure where customers are not a priori prepared to pay much more, unless there is a very strong quality proposition to them, or where it becomes obvious to them where they are prepared to pay more. We have seen it in the mobile telecommunications. People are prepared to pay substantially more if it becomes the additional service element becomes clear to them. So I think what is needed is that basically that there is a sort of very strong communication exercise which makes to the consumers clear what are the benefits, and it must be demonstrably clear to them. It's not just rhetorics which would help in that case. It needs also that they need to see a substantial difference. Now, if that is achieved by the industry, then I think it has already managed to allay some substantial fears from the investment community, because then they can see that given a regulatory framework which could be supportive to the industry, for instance, if a sort of a regulatory framework would be put in place which on one hand ensures open access to basically to cater for the competition element, but on the other hand it would also sufficiently ring fence the investment by a regulation that would ensure some sort of warranted or regulated return to the infrastructure, which would also then investors give perhaps a piece of the cake in case of upsides. So if that would be established in a long-term, credible way, I think long-term investors, which are the big money, I'm talking about pension funds and those who are going for investments which don't need to have an extraordinary high return, but it's just that they are in for the long term and they want to see a long-term return on their investment. So that is, I think, what the industry with a fiber infrastructure has to rather to move. So we have to move away from short-term considerations and take a longer-term view. And I think if that is achieved, that would be already quite a significant step towards easing the financing problem of this infrastructure.
Thank you.